An Evening with the Ghost of Sybil Leek, created, directed, and produced by Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo Mullen. A collection of books authored by this famous astrologer and paranormal expert is highlighted in this tribute to her. Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo Mullen is one of a few people still around who actually knew and worked with Sybil, as she preferred to be called. The video features a tape from a 1978 lecture by Sybil given at the Roundtable 3, a conference in Miami. Also, we would like to note that during this video, unlike any other that we've attempted to record, there was a thunderstorm that went through. So you'll hear thunder as part of the background and rain at times in this video. Now we will listen to Dr. Mullen discuss the history of Sybil and her contributions to the field.
This is astrologer Dikki Jo Mullen coming to you from downtown Orlando, Florida, with an evening with the ghost of Sybil Leek, mysteries of the supernatural, and I will share with you a buried treasure. Mr. Hotfoot Jackson, he was a famous jackdaw, blackbird, crow, whatever you want to call him, whom I got to meet when I worked with Sybil Leek. And she also spoke about her aunt who could call birds. That's just part of the magic that entered my life back in the 1970s when I was working with Sybil Leek. I think I'm one of the very few people left on the planet who actually knew and worked with the great Sybil Leek. And back in 2011, I prepared an evening with the ghost of Sybil Leek, which inspired this tape. Sybil Leek, one dark and stormy night, almost on the eve of the 29th anniversary of her death. That was 2011. She passed away in 1982. She presented me with a buried treasure. The treasure is a gift which has haunted me and others ever since, and in a nice way I'd like to share that haunting with you. It's as if Sybil is back among the living and is insisting that her gift be shared. The buried treasure is an actual recording of Sybil's voice. Quite possibly, it's the only one in existence. Often called the greatest astrologer and witch of the 20th century, Sybil said when I first met her and asked what to call her, whether it was Dame Leek or Miss Leek, she said, "Just call me Sybil. Anyone who means anything to me just calls me Sybil." Sybil was the first to popularize the mystical and the paranormal. Born in the New Forest in the south of England on February 22nd, 1917, she was world famous and for a while the darling of the television and radio show circuit. An expert on astrology, witchcraft, herbs, and various aspects of the paranormal, she authored dozens of books. I have a few autographed copies of her books here. Her best-selling Diary of a Witch served to encourage and inspire a whole generation who grew up when the spectrum of occult studies was opening. Sybil's legacy was a rich one, yet often today, especially among those new to the field of metaphysics, she has been forgotten. Upon mentioning her name, occasionally I'm amazed when someone says, "So who was Sybil Leek?" She was quite an enigmatic great person, and I feel as if I want to honor her legacy. In the 1970s, I was in my late teens and early 20s. This was the final decade of Sybil's career, and I worked with her as an astrology assistant. It all began on October the 5th of 1972. I was very concerned about the first Earth Day. Of course, that was in 1970. And ever since then, saving the Earth, attention to our planet, has really picked up in popularity and concern for obvious reasons. But then one was considered kind of a crank for jumping on the first Earth Day teachings. Sybil was on a media show that I saw, and she talked about the ecological disasters to come. I was 18 years old when I heard her speak, and I was so troubled and upset that I wrote her a personal letter. Now, Sybil had said when she was on the program, she was very outspoken. She had a Scorpio ascendant, very intense, that she really resented it when people wrote to her and didn't even include postage. So I included a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I got a personal letter from her. The original is behind me on the backdrop. There it is with her signature. But the copy read, and I had sent the letter sometime earlier. Dear Miss Mullen, Indialantic, Florida. Now, Sybil was born in England, but she had immigrated to the United States and lived in Las Vegas, in California, Texas, and New York before settling on Florida's Space Coast. She said the Space Coast reminded her of the south of France, which was the nicest place in all of the places she traveled all around the world she had ever been. So I thought it was kind of nice that our family lived in Indialantic, Florida at the time. So she says, Dear Miss Mullen, thank you for your interesting letter. I am sorry for the delay, but I have been away from home and am only now returning for a few days before I leave again. I have every confidence that pollution will begin to diminish. Like most sicknesses, it took a long time to get into this state, so it cannot be expected to get cured all at once. We all need to work at it from a personal level and never let it happen again. This is nice. She's using the past tense that the world really will right itself and recover. Continuing, the Earth Mother herself revolts against all of the misdeeds and cruelties done to her. But she is the strongest force and must and will is capitalized, survive. With all good wishes, Sybil. Well, I was absolutely thrilled and over the moon because Sybil, of course, was and continued to be my heroine. I was involved with the Theosophical Society and still am at that time, and I did find from September of 1971 a program that she had presented for the Theosophical Society in St. Louis. And at that time, she felt as if she was the reincarnation of Helena Blavatsky, and she looked and seemed and certainly had the intellect of Miss Blavatsky. That she felt that she had come back to life again and that she was Helena Blavatsky. And I thought that was especially interesting and a synchronicity since I came across that information right after receiving this landmark letter from Sybil. It seems as if there's a lot of magic and a lot that happens around Sybil. Well, a couple of years passed, and I was struggling to get through college, and Sybil opened a store in Indialantic called Sybil Leek's Curiosity Shop. My mother, Elaine, was shopping in downtown Indialantic and went into the store at the time. And she met Sybil. Sybil was just enraged, bouncing around the shop, angry. She had opened it for her niece, Bella, to operate as a project, and Bella didn't like it. Bella preferred other interests, and Sybil didn't know what to do with the shop. Well, my mother was an artist, and she was looking for a place to promote her artwork. And she had a piece of her artwork with her with a quote from Sybil on it. It was wood-burning art with sayings, which, by the way, are so popular right now. People always have all sorts of little things that say peace, or it's only a home if it has a cat, etc. Elaine was way ahead of that. Elaine was my mother. And she showed Sybil this quote: "Everything that happens is linked to the sacrifice of something else." Sybil liked it. They became friends, and Elaine had a job, a trade actually, for a venue in order to promote her artwork. And they definitely hit it off well. Sybil was a Pisces. My mother had her Mars, the energy planet, in Pisces, and I think they sort of encouraged each other. And one day in the shop, my mother came in and there was an upside-down picture hanging of Martin K. Dean, who was the author of The $6 Million Man, surrounded with black candles. It seems that he, as an older man at the time, was Sybil's niece, had not treated the niece well. And so that was kind of an interesting example of some of the things that Sybil was capable of. The curiosity shop was filled with interesting antiques, and some of them I got, by this time it was my 21st birthday, I got as a gift. One is this bell, and one was this Victorian dice cup. My mother had purchased those from the shop. And these are two of Sybil's early books. They date from 1964, published in England, about the antique business. And they only hint at the paranormal, but they're absolutely the most thrilling, intriguing thing you would ever want to read, with anecdotes about antiques. And Sybil Leek's breakout book, Diary of a Witch, in 1964, made her in 1968, made her an international celebrity. In the shop, this was all going on by the time the 1970s were rolling along, and Sybil produced all of these incredible books all at once, all about the paranormal. There's Reincarnation, The Second Chance, The Complete Art of Witchcraft. There's Sybil Leek's Guide to Successful Living, her Beauty Guide, her cookbook, her Telepathy Guide, and also the book of Curses. This is autographed to me, and it says, "Dikki Jo, may you know only blessings, never curses." I loved it. This is her Moon Sign book. She has something on tomorrow's headlines today. She made a lot of prophecies early on that have been coming true since. And also Driving Out the Devils. Now this is a very interesting book because Sybil wrote it when she was living in a condo in Cocoa Beach. She moved around a great deal within Brevard County, where she was haunted by various entities and spirits. And this describes how she got rid of them and sent them on to another level. Entity attachment can be an occasional problem with those who work in the paranormal. The Night Voyagers, You and Your Dreams, that's a wonderful book that she wrote. This one, I went into her shop, and it's about herbs. And she said to me, obviously you're interested in herbs. She still didn't know me at that point except as Elaine's daughter. How to Be Your Own Astrologer. And there are a number of others. These aren't even all of them. My Life in Astrology, Cast Your Own Spell, her book of the curious and the occult, and then an anthology, The Best of Sybil Leek, and a guide to presidential candidates during the 1970 election. And she did predict the winner, by the way, if you read that book. So at that time, I was so in awe of her I could hardly speak. but my mother was working with her, and one day Sybil came into the shop and said, I absolutely can't stand those astrologers I've been hiring down in St. Louis to do my charts, and now they've both quit, and I don't know why. Well, she was pretty outspoken. I could figure out why later on as I got to know her. But she had too many horoscopes to do to keep up with. She was so busy. And this was in the days before there were computerized horoscopes. So she was complaining to my mother about not knowing where to find a competent astrologer she could stand to work with. And my mother told her about me. And Sybil said, she's 21 years old, what does she know? And I thought, Mother came home and said that. And Sybil had sent along some birth dates for me to do and said sometime this week have her come in and show me what she can do. Well, I stayed up all night and did the charts, and then I also did write-ups about them, the interpretations, and took them in. And Sybil hired me on the spot, a very big highlight in my life. And I went on to work with her until she was ill and had to retire. But I ended up doing some ghost writing for her magazine, which came out for a while, Sybil Leek's Astrology, and then also did horoscopes for her for many, many years. And eventually I worked as a trance medium for her, and we worked with some highly confidential information. Sybil would use a pendulum and a map. She was working with some things going on in the Virgin Islands, and have me lapse into a trance and do a reading. She never would tell me if I was correct or not, but she kept asking me to do it. So I must have done something right. It was really a wonderful experience and quite shocking. I eventually prepared an evening with the ghost of Sybil Leek for the Brevard Metaphysicians group. And this group met for 20 years and had a lot of members in it, all of whom liked Sybil Leek and were kind of in awe of her. And I was able one night to do a presentation for them and to bring along a tape of Sybil's presentation that she did in 1978 for a group in Miami called the Round Table. That was a group that met yearly. This was Round Table number 3 during the 1970s to feature speakers about the paranormal and the metaphysics. In 1978, I was working for Sybil, but she had ridden down to Miami. Sybil never drove, with another employee who did publicity for her. And I was just there as a guest in the audience. And Sybil did the tape that you'll hear, which is her ghost speaking in a little while. And then she motioned to me to come up on the stage. And I went up to speak to her, and she said, I absolutely can't stand riding back to Brevard County with the other employee. Will you give me a ride home? Well, I was absolutely thrilled. And then I asked Sybil what was wrong with this woman, because I thought she was kind of pleasant and caring. And she said all she did was talk about herself all the way up and down. So that gave me an idea to not talk about myself, but to let Sybil talk about herself. And it was a wonderful 4-hour drive. I found out all sorts of things. Sybil talked about how she traveled with a circus, and how she traveled around the world with the money she earned from her first book. It was really quite interesting. She talked about how she had an aunt who could call birds, and that was how Sybil learned to tame Mr. Hotfoot Jackson, the famous jackdaw that she was with. And it was just quite an interesting, intriguing time to travel with her. I don't know if she found me as boring as the other lady, because I didn't ever take a long journey with her. Occasionally she would ask to go to the grocery store or ask if we could go for a meal, whatever. But it was really the longest time. Usually I would take work home and then bring it back in for her to look at, except when we did the trance work. Well, Sybil had many, many talents. She only had 3 years of formal college or schooling, not even college, but she didn't need any more than that because of her incredible intellect. And aside from being an expert in the antique world, she also was very good at real estate. And she bought and sold a number of houses in the Brevard County area while I was working with her. And I want to show you some of the pictures of them. I also have some collage art from the program that I did with the Brevard metaphysicians that I'll offer you in the end. This was the location of Sybil Leek's Curiosity Shop on Fifth Avenue in Indialantic. This was after she had moved out of the shop, but it's the location. This was a beautiful house she had on Riverside Drive in Melbourne Beach, the next little beach town south. And you can see that there's a skylight on top, just a lovely home. And this is the home of Julian Leek, her younger son. As far as I know, he's still living there. And this is the Melbourne Beach Pier, which she would walk out on and call the wind. Now, calling the wind was a very easy, interesting spell she taught me, and I taught it to the Brevard Metaphysicians group. The east is good for neither man nor beast. The wind in the north the old folks should never venture forth. The wind in the south blows the hook in the fish's mouth. The wind in the west of all of the winds is best. And then she would say that will call in the voices of the ancestors. And if anyone wants to become clairaudient, clairvoyant, have enhanced mediumship, go out somewhere where the wind can come and not do any damage, and try that little ritual and just see what happens. This is another home that Sybil lived in. This one was at 404th Avenue in Indialantic, a very old corner house, one of the first houses there. She had hand-hooked rugs with all of the alchemical symbols on them in gold with a blue background on the floor. And that was absolutely amazing how she found the time and energy to do the things that she did. This is a house at 123 3rd Avenue off A1A, just north of the Melbourne Causeway, for those of you that know that part of the state of Florida. This is where she lived just before she passed away in 1982. The house still had gargoyles and tile work that she did for many years. Once when I was working for her, she was getting kind of tired of people by then. She posted something on the door. Unless you have telephoned first, don't even think of ringing the doorbell. I copied that because I thought, well, that's very interesting. She's expecting me so I can dare to ring the doorbell. But she was a very strong personality. She once said that most people weren't worth bothering with because their lives were so mundane and boring. And I'll tell you, for the rest of us, after seeing all the things that she did and could write, I could kind of empathize with that. Although feeling like one is boring isn't very flattering. I often felt Sybil didn't really think very much of me. But one time she did come to our family home looking for me. I had gotten upset with a lot of things around Florida and taken off to work in New London, Connecticut as the night auditor of a hotel, a small bed and breakfast that stood on Long Island Sound, called the Long Island Sound Inn, in fact, is what it was called. And I just couldn't deal with things anymore. Sybil wasn't giving me that much work, and it was the various challenges many people go through in their early 20s, trying to get going and have a life. But anyway, she was looking for me, and that really, really flattered me because I didn't ever see her again after that until attending her memorial service in Melbourne, Florida. and she passed away on the eve of her most sacred night, Halloween. It was October the 26th, 1982, and the memorial service was October the 29th. So I thought that that was really kind of intriguing. I have here some pictures of the Ghost of Sybil Leek evening, and this is Maria Bonwell, who had the Brevard Metaphysicians group. This is someone looking at the posters you'll see behind you, which I saved from that time period. This is Maria's living room, filled from cover to cover and top to bottom with people. It was the largest turnout they had ever had because this topic was so intriguing to the people who had grown up and knew of Sybil's fame and fortune in the area. I want to now begin The Ghost of Sybil Leek, a tape for you to listen to. This was recorded in 1978 at Round Table 3, and this was a gift Sybil gave me for giving her a lift home on that fateful evening. And so please enjoy The Ghost of Sybil Leek, and I will at the end return to read her natal horoscope to you.
So that we cannot see what is there, but everything is there to be examined. Something fitted to inspire a sense of awe. For the word awe, I would like to substitute wonderment, because it is wonderment and the wondrous things that we search out, an exciting adventure. If we can open our eyes as we get over and see each day as a wondrous experience, we keep young. And we'll keep on searching for the wonders. Something incomprehensible through being above human intelligence. Well, incomprehensible is a lengthy word, lacking in understanding. But I don't believe that a human being is ever understanding anything if the mind is left open, if we are prepared to see not only with our eyes but with the inner eyes, and if we are occasionally prepared to be guided by those who see perhaps a little better than us. Now we come to something intentionally kept secret and hidden. Well, we are in an enlightened age when we could put a man on the moon, when we are capable of studying anything. I don't think there is anything that should be intentionally kept secret if we want to find it. But we must have motivation to find and explore these mysteries. Supernatural, beyond or exceeding the powers of the laws of nature. The laws of nature, action and reaction. And we forget that. For one action, there will be a reaction. And so if we seek, there will be an action, a reaction of finding. And what are some of these mysteries of the supernatural, which we are so afraid of and are incomprehensible to human intelligence, according to Webster? There's telepathy. Now, telepathy is not the capability of reading a person's mind. It is a series of vibrations sent out from the brain, which is the organ of the mind, thinking part, which will be reached by someone else. It rather makes a human being into a human radio, but you have to switch into that. It doesn't always come naturally. Many people say, well, we're in great rapport. I can send messages to my husband, my lover, my child, whatever, and they will get it. But this is often at random. What becomes quite important in the study of the supernatural or the natural laws of nature is that we can harness some of these things and draw upon them in everyday life to use them. I think that in the last half of the 20th century, telepathy is going to be a very important part of our life because we do not communicate well on an everyday level. And so we're going to be thrown back into the areas of telepathy. About telepathy, unless you put the fear in it, the fear of being controlled by someone else. Not true. Because you have within you the ability to receive that message or not receive it, just as you have the ability to switch on to a radio program or a television show and switch off. Always remember that. But if you want to do telepathic experiments, try to do so with somebody with you to begin with. Keep a record of the messages sent And be very accurate. Don't leave things in your imagination. Don't be wise after the event. Now, telepathy needs one transmitter and a receiver or more receivers to function. When we come to extrasensory perception, we do not need the other people. Extrasensory perception, extra awareness, relates to the psyche being alerted to something that is about to happen, that will happen, that maybe has happened in the past. And it is a very wonderful guide, even to people who are brought up to revere logic. Because extrasensory perception, another so-called mystery, takes over when logic runs out, and it very often does in everyday life. An extrasensory perception, to me, mean nothing unless they are part of everyday life. If we develop this natural gift of extrasensory perception, then we can use it. It can become a guide, but it only becomes a guide when we have done a preliminary investigation into it to prove that it is accurate, to prove that we're not being led astray, to prove that we have, until a time comes, and you know that flash of intuition or ESP cannot be wrong and will guide you into something that is important in your everyday life. Extrasensory perception already plays a great part in our life because rather than telepathy, we don't have to rely on somebody else. It will come. One of the gravest dangers with extrasensory perception is to know what to do with it. If you get a flash about someone else, are you justified in telling danger, or should you keep your mouth shut? Now, what you have to realize is if you keep your mouth shut because you're afraid of being laughed at, you are doing grave injustice to what extrasensory perception is doing for you. Never be afraid. This is why we have mysteries. This is why we say supernatural. All these things are natural and are not meant to be mysteries. But ages of deception, ages of brainwashing have shrouded the beautiful things of life, the extra senses, the extra awareness, with this sense of mystery. If you have a flash, an intuition about someone else, you should let them know. If they laugh, it's good to laugh anyway. Laugh and grow fat. I've laughed a lot in my life. But at least you have followed through with that important prediction, that important ESP, that important awareness. But don't let your imagination run riot. One of the dangers and why we are still trapped into ideas of myth is that the average human being is very emotional. And suddenly, ESP and telepathy are wonderful things that we can become emotional about. We have to learn to guard and guide our emotions so that what remains is a pure spark of reason, intelligence, and intuition merging together. And that has been considered mysterious and supernatural. And I can't, for the life of me, understand this. Because while extrasensory perception and telepathy are intangibles, astrology is not an intangible. Astrology is something very, very tangible. You can see each step that you take. But we have a group of 150 scientists taking an adverse astrology as nonsense. I called every one of them up and said, do you understand astrology? And they said, no. So they may be experts on nonsense, but they're not experts on astrology. The idea that planets influence our life is certainly not new. It has survived for some 6,000 years. There's an empiric as well as a traditional history that this is more we are beginning to understand it, aided by the very scientists who decry astrology, because they too are finding that intangibles affect our lives. What can be more intangible than someone pining away for love. What can be more intangible than someone pining away because they are lonely? You can't stretch out and feel loneliness. It is in the act, it is there. And so it is in astrology. Now, I'll take no nonsense from anyone who condemns astrology unless they have given it some thought and studied it. Because astrology starts with mathematical precision in the interpretation of the mathematics. Certainly, there may be a little romanticization, not always in the astrologer who has learned not to be emotional. When I have been teaching astrology, I've spent many, many hours telling my students these hieroglyphics as they are. You may love the person, you may be divinely influenced by the person, but if you are doing a correct chart, you will read this in the proper manner, unemotionally, and write it down as it is. So astrology is certainly not a mystery, and it's not supernatural. It is there as a skill and a discipline. Two things that we need to come into the occult sciences, because many people see the occult sciences as a reason to run wild with freedom, carrying a banner for freedom. But without discipline, we never know true freedom. And I would say that for anyone interested in studying the other occult sciences, astrology is a very good beginning. It will make, and if you're meant to go on, it certainly won't break you. If you haven't got the patience, then you give it up. And don't think because you weren't brilliant at mathematics that you can't do astrology. Things are very much more simplified these days than they were when I was young. And even the government puts out the ephemerides, which I think is very nice of them. People forget that. Another mystery of the supernatural is the subject of ghosts. Now, ghosts have fascinated people for a long time. They've fascinated generations of writers, generations of painters, generations of storytellers, and children. But the ghost phenomena is very nice because we can be a little bit afraid of it in a legitimate manner. We should have our neuroses and our fears sometimes. I had a neurosis and a fear, but I got over it. Mm-hmm. And the phenomena of ghosts really can be explained when you have come a little way along the line in studying the so-called supernatural and its mysteries and the occult sciences. Because the ghost phenomena is really not very much of a phenomena. If you believe that the spirit is, then energy can again go back into matter, then it is quite likely that you will see a ghost or hear a ghost or feel a ghost or even be able to measure a ghost. All these things are possible by study. Never condemn a ghost out of hand or else it will come to haunt you forever and you will deserve it. Years ago, the newspapers would do tremendous articles about me saying I went ghost hunting. I never hunted a ghost in my life. I was interested in ghosts because it was part of my search for truth. My search for truth in the matter of reincarnation, chiefly. I wanted to know. I was probably fortunate in my life that I was born and able to develop by studying sciences. And I have been able to be on both sides of the fence. I've been able to be involved in them as a medium, as a ghost hunter, as an astrologer, as somebody who studies palmistry, everything. I had a beautiful education in this. But on the other side, I've also been able to investigate, to look into things I didn't understand and to say, I don't know the answer, you tell me. And so I have really studied from the point of view that I have listened to other people telling me their experiences. I have been able to dismiss the idea that everything was caused by the wind or somebody left a door open. Because in the end, I firmly believe in reincarnation, that the spirit is indestructible and that the spirit can be earthbound and it can come back to leave messages, to convey spirit messages to you. or in extreme cases, to be very nasty to you, because poltergeists are not exactly the sort of people you want to share a house with at all. Another area which is exciting a great deal of interest today in the legends of Indian life. Now, I think if we could take the legends and see them as American Indian history instead of legends, then we would get somewhere in solving the mystery of them. Bigfoot can be either a great laugh or it can be something that we need to investigate. And we should not be afraid to do so. Because even, taking into account the very bad films made of Bigfoot with a zipper in his jacket, which we have to dismiss as a lie, there is in history some evidence that large races existed and in remote areas of the world have been able to sustain themselves. Well, it would be nice to understand them. It would be nice to meet them. Because if we're going to be ready to meet visitors from outer space, how nice to be able to meet those from our present environment. I would like to see food, not just eliminated as nonsense. Let's know for sure. Because there's a definite history that these large people, these different people, have been around. And we need to know about them. I was recently in the foothills of the Himalayas, and there is a sense of wonder there, not of mystery, but of wonder, that only comes in remote places. And it is not a feeling of loneliness. It is a feeling that somebody is around. I didn't see the abominable snowman, but I felt tremendous messages coming through in that particular part of the world. And yet you don't need to go to the Himalayas to find that. In the remote parts of Oregon, you could still find the same message. Now, this is picked up all around the world, and nearly always in these highly psychic areas, there is a history or a legend about some creature that once lived there and probably wonderful if we could find them. How wonderful if we could say this is no longer a mystery of the supernatural. Yes, there is someone here that has lived a long time, that has had their own energies and forces around and can make a contribution to our lives as we can make a contribution to theirs. After all, we have found in the Pacific tribes that have not been discovered for years, and they have been there. I don't think it's any more remote. We could find a group of giants and learn something from them. I don't like mysteries. I always want to know. Tell me there's a mystery, and I want to know why it is a mystery. I cheat on reading Agatha Christie books. I read the end first. It's so much fun, and then see how she got at it. But in the occult mysteries, you have to go slowly. You can't. You may see the end product, but there's nothing written out that you can. And that's why it is part of the experience of living to move slowly through these mysteries and say, oh, that was a mystery yesterday, but today I know it. And then share that mystery with others with an explanation, and then use what knowledge was in those mysteries. We have another mystery which excites everyone, particularly people, I think, in Florida. Now, expeditions go out. They're expensive to equip. They go out and we don't hear very much about them afterwards. I don't know why this is. Nobody disappears. They come back, but we don't hear too much about these expeditions. There's one out now in Bimini. Friend Scott Carpenter of Wisconsin called me and said, goodbye, I'm going on an expedition to Atlantis. I said, well, tell me all about it when you come back. Not a word. So that is a modern mystery. But the mystery of Atlantis as a lost continent, I do not think is really a mystery. It's such a mistake to think that the world only began 2,000 years ago, that there was nothing there. I think that we have had all this knowledge and that nothing is hidden from mankind. And it is always there for us. But we have to retrace our steps and more into understanding. One of the things about Atlantis is to understand not so much why it disappeared, because it was a bad continent. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it had to disappear at that time. But to know what Atlantis had that we can use in terms of knowledge and wisdom in our day, because we too may be heading towards our disaster period. And we ought to know how we can make the best of the years ahead of us. I really don't want to think of scientific expeditions only going in search of Atlantis. There is already proof of underground temples which link up with the temples in the Yucatan, in which end up with the pyramids in Egypt. There we come to another mystery, the pyramids. Well, I'm sure we're going to have speakers on the pyramids, so I can't deal with those very much. But if you have stood anywhere near a pyramid, suddenly it is not a mystery. Now, I know I'm in a beautiful position that I do pick up things fairly quickly, not because I'm bright, but because I've trained myself with discipline to do this, and you too can do the same. What just massive edifices put up as funeral parlors at all? There's lots beyond the pyramids. We have mathematics again, we have measurements, we have forces of energy that we can tune into. And these are not mysteries if we go with an open mind and say, I want to feel what there is near a pyramid. I want to understand it. There are plenty of books about the pyramids and pyramidology, and they are well worth studying, because you will see that nothing was left to chance that made the pyramid inch into a unit that we can now relate to in our present lives. It was not by chance that the pyramids were in that position. One other mystery of the universe, but not perhaps a supernatural one, is Stonehenge. Stonehenge is not unique. There are lesser Stonehenges through the world. Again, when you begin to study, you must always study. You cannot take it and say it's nonsense because this is someone else's opinion. Study all opinions. Professor Hawkins had a great book about Stonehenge. A lot of validity in it. But then you have to see Stonehenge again as a place of faith. A place where vibrations, as strong as those vibrations in Atlantis, go out. A place that you can tune into if you know how. And that is always the secret, if you know how.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed that visit with the ghost of Sybil Leek. Let's look a little bit at her astrology chart just to kind of understand this enigmatic and incredible personality with a little bit more depth. And the horoscope will be up on the screen for those of you who've been studying astrology, or even just to look at the pattern and begin to see how the horoscope, which was Sybil Leek's first love, she always said astrology ties in with describing her life and who she was and her times. By the way, there was a little bit of static on the tape that wasn't there. That was paranormal. We had some storm clouds in the background, and I really feel that Sybil was giving us a hello from heaven, from the other side. And let's take a look at remembering Sybil Leek, the most famous witch and astrologer of the 20th century. I am a witch. That's the first line of her book, The Diary of a Witch, through which she became so very famous. The simple and powerful opening statement from the 1968 bestseller is gripping the heart and minds of an entire generation still. Those drawn to follow the old ways of the craft, not negative, but nature and pre-Christian energy. The legendary Sybil Leek was among the first to popularize astrology, herbal healing, crystals, tarot, and numerology, mediumship, and the many related subjects. Her work, comprised of dozens of books as well as television interviews and newspaper features and her own magazine, Sybil Leek's Astrology, profoundly influenced the early years of the New Age movement. Today, we who practice in the metaphysical field enjoy a wider acceptance of these beliefs, and I believe we owe Sybil a thumbs up and a debt of gratitude. Sybil was born, as her horoscope will show you, on February the 22nd, 1917. That date was taken directly from the memorial cards offered at her service on October 29th, 1982, just 3 days after she passed away. And in her diary, she describes her birthplace as a wild and desolate witch-ridden part of Staffordshire, England, at a crossroads where 3 rivers meet, along with the backbone of the Pennine mountain range, the backbone of England. During mid-November of 1976, when I was working for Sybil, she mentioned that the planet Uranus was crossing her ascendant that week. Now, a quick look at the Ephemeris, which is the book that Sybil mentions in her tape and which astrologers use to calculate charts, showed that Uranus was sitting at 8 degrees of Scorpio that week. And that gives us her accurate birth time rectified to 11:40 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, just before the traditional hour of midnight. This zodiacal degree is linked to a high degree of intelligence, impatience, a passionate nature, and strong emotions. Sybil was born at the new moon, with both her sun and moon in the sign of Pisces. That made her a double Pisces. A new moon in the horoscope shows a famous individual who can become a symbol of an icon for an important movement. 2 other examples are Queen Victoria, who symbolized the entire historic cycle of the Victorian age, and Clara Barton, whose life symbolizes the Red Cross. Other new moon personalities. Sybil was very proud of her family tree and lineage of the craft, which go back to the year 1134. The 4th house of her horoscope was very strong, which shows family life and lineage. Russian and Irish occultists on both sides of her family, she mentioned often, and a relationship with the 17th century English witch, Molly Lee, who also practiced herbalism and magic in the same area where Sybil was born. She also owned several different antique shops and wrote such delightful books about the antique business, along with her active involvement in real estate. Antiques represent history and roots. The real estate is the 4th house, housing, and this really describes her stellium, or grouping of planets. She was close to both of her parents, particularly proud of a psychic link with her father. Her mother, fondly called Madame or Dame Louise, visited Sybil in Florida during the winter months. Louise was quite well known to Sybil's friends and neighbors. I met her at one time, a little sprite of a woman about the 1/3 the size of Sybil, with white hair and always beautifully dressed. And during the 1970s, along Florida's Space Coast, they became local royalty. The first mother and daughter of the community. They hobnobbed with all the local celebrities. Sybil mentioned Scott Carpenter, astronaut, on her tape. And the write-ups behind me, which I showed at the Ghost of Sybil Leek presentation to the Brevard metaphysicians, references her tie to the mayor of Indialantic and other celebrities. Her name was always popping up in the newspaper. Sybil has an applying Sun-Mars conjunction. The Sun and Mars conjunct show enthusiasm, but also her infamous temper. And this trines her ascendant, or the ascendant is the body that we all walk around in. And many people described her as never being bested in any kind of confrontation. The Pisces placements form a grand trine in the water signs, with Pluto and Saturn in the sign of Cancer. And while growing up, Sybil described the beach vacations in the south of France. She said her family migrated like birds at the first hint of the chilly English winters. She lived from the late 1960s until her death in Brevard County, Florida, in a variety of beachside homes, as we've shown earlier, near the ocean and overlooking the Indian River Lagoon. This powerful water sign influence, Scorpio ascendant, Pisces sun and moon, and the 2 Cancer placements describe her affinity for the waterfront. She was often seen strolling along the beach near sunset in her flowing dresses. She designed and sewed these herself. And the strong accent on the water signs also shows her great sensitivity and natural attunement to the spirit realm. Neptune, the dispositor or ruler of the Pisces planets, is in Leo in her 9th house. Now she has something called a mutual reception between her sun and her moon. Her sun, the ruler of Leo, is in Pisces, and her Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, is in Leo. Mutual receptions, planets in each other's ruling signs, bring a magical quality to the birth chart, astrology students, and they have a definite quality to add 2 Neptunes and 2 suns. And also the chart that's elevated near the high noon position is called the high leg, or at the mid-heaven. That would be like 12 o'clock noon on a clock. And it's the most significant thing that Neptune in Leo is in mutual reception with the sun. This makes Sybil as much a Leo as a Pisces. And mutual receptions are very fortunate. So reading them back, that gives her an aplomb of flamboyance, a definite leadership ability, and a strong personality. Sybil always wore unusual jewelry and had a natural star quality. She was one of those people who didn't have to say a word, but when I would go to take her places, when I was working for her to get food or to do some shopping, she immediately attracted a lot of attention and drama. She was associated with a lot of figures in the entertainment world and well-known authors. Hans Holzer and Jess Stern were 2, and that shows the elevated or 9th house Neptune. She once said that she had been in the public eye since the age of 16. She'd never say exactly how many times she had been married. I think it was 3 times, and at her 16th year she became involved with a concert pianist whom I think was her first husband. Neptune makes an out-of-sign conjunction with Saturn, showing her hard work and her dedication to 9th house matters such as travel, writing, and spirituality. She traveled around the world following a successful media career in England. Largely self-educated, as I've mentioned, she only had 3 years of formal schooling. She was quite a storyteller. I found that out especially on my drive back following the tape, the evening that was taped, when she told me so many incredible things, details about her life that had not been written at any time.